I remember the night Sarah told me she wanted to wait until marriage. We were 3 months into dating, sitting on my couch in my small Portland apartment. She looked at me with those earnest brown eyes and explained how important it was to her, how she grew up in a traditional family where these values mattered. I was surprised at first, but then something shifted inside me. I felt honored. Special. Like we were building something different, something more meaningful than what everyone else had. So I agreed to wait. 3 years I waited, believing we were creating a foundation strong enough to last forever. But 6 weeks after she left me, I discovered the truth about those values she claimed were so sacred. Turns out they only applied to me. Before I tell you how everything fell apart, let me ask you something. Where are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments because I want to know. I am not alone in this. And if you have ever trusted someone, completely believed in their words with your whole heart only to find out it was all just a convenient story they told themselves, then this one is for you. Hit that like button and subscribe, because you are going to want to hear how this ends. Let me take you back to the beginning, to when I actually thought I had found the one. I met Sarah at a local art exhibit in downtown Portland on a rainy October evening. The gallery was small, tucked between a vintage bookstore and a coffee roaster, the kind of place where creative types gathered on Friday nights. I was not much of an art guy, honestly. My buddy Marcus had dragged me there because he was trying to impress some girl who worked at the gallery. But that night changed everything. Sarah was standing in front of this massive abstract painting, all swirls of blue and gold, wearing a light floral dress that somehow made sense despite the weather outside. She had her head tilted slightly, really studying the piece, and when I walked up next to her and made some awkward comment about not understanding modern art, she laughed. Not a polite laugh, but a real one that crinkled her eyes at the corners. We spent the next hour walking through the exhibit together, talking about everything except the art. She told me she worked as a marketing coordinator for a mid-sized tech company. I shared that I was a software developer, hoping that did not sound as boring as it felt to say it out loud. But Sarah did not seem bored. She asked questions, leaned in when I talked, actually listened. We discovered we both loved jazz, both preferred small coffee shops to chains. Both had this dream of traveling to Japan someday. Our first official date was at this tiny cafe near Powell's Books. We sat there for 4 hours straight, closing down the place. The barista had to practically shoo us out at closing time. I remember walking Sarah to her car that night, the Portland drizzle making halos around the streetlights, and thinking to myself that this was it. This was the person I had been waiting to meet. The chemistry felt effortless, natural, like we had known each other for years instead of days. Those first few months were everything you hope for when you start dating someone. Sarah would text me good morning before I even woke up. We would meet for lunch when our schedules allowed. Weekends were adventures, exploring the Columbia River Gorge, driving out to the coast, finding new restaurants in neighborhoods we had never visited. I introduced her to my favorite hiking trails. She took me to art galleries and indie film screenings I would have never gone to on my own. 3 months in, on a Wednesday night in January, Sarah came over to my apartment. We had just finished watching a movie, and there was this shift in the air, like she had something important to say. I turned off the television, and we sat there in the quiet, just the sound of rain against the windows. That was when she told me about her values. She spoke carefully, like she had rehearsed this conversation in her head multiple times. She explained that she grew up in a family where certain things were important, where intimacy was something you saved for marriage. She said it was not about religion exactly, more about meaning and commitment. She wanted her wedding night to be special, untainted by past experiences or casual decisions. Her voice wavered slightly when she said it, like she was afraid I would laugh or walk away. I will be honest, my first reaction was surprise. We were in our late 20s. This was not something I expected to hear, but as I sat there looking at her, seeing how vulnerable she was being, how much courage it took to say this, something clicked. I realized this was not about me proving anything or her testing me. This was about who she was at her core, and if I loved her, I needed to respect that. So I told her I would wait. I took her hand and said that if this was important to her, then it was important to me too. I meant every word. I saw it as a sign that what we had was different, deeper than physical attraction. We were building something real, something that would last because it was based on more than just chemistry. Sarah cried that night. She told me I was different from anyone she had ever dated, that most guys would have run for the hills. She said she felt lucky to have found me. I remember holding her, feeling her shoulders shake slightly as she let out all that relief, and thinking that this was what love was supposed to feel like. Safe, honest, built on mutual respect. The months turned into years. We did everything couples do. We traveled to Crater Lake and stood at the rim, amazed by water so blue it did not seem real. We had picnics at the Japanese garden in Washington Park. We spent lazy Sundays wandering through farmers' markets, buying overpriced artisan bread and locally made honey. I met her parents who lived in Beaverton. They welcomed me into their home, and her father actually pulled me aside one evening and told me he was glad Sarah had found someone solid. I met her younger brother, who was in college and obsessed with video games. We actually bonded over that. Sarah met my family too. My little sister Jenny took to her immediately. They would text each other memes and inside jokes that I was not part of. My parents were more reserved, the way parents are when they are trying not to seem too excited too soon, but I could tell they approved. My mom would ask about Sarah every time we talked, wanting to know when we were coming to visit again. We talked about the future constantly. Sarah wanted a spring wedding, something small and intimate, maybe at a vineyard in the Willamette Valley. She wanted 2 kids, a boy and a girl if we could be so lucky. I wanted a house with a yard somewhere in the suburbs where we could have a dog and space to breathe. We would stay up late, sketching out these plans, laughing about what we would name our kids, arguing playfully about whether we would get a golden retriever or a chocolate lab. I worked overtime to save money for a ring. I had it all planned out. There was this jeweler downtown who made custom pieces, and I had been going in on my lunch breaks to design something perfect for Sarah. A simple solitaire with a thin band, elegant and understated, just like her. I was planning to propose in the spring, maybe on a hike, up to Multnomah Falls, somewhere meaningful. Those 3 years were not always easy, I will admit that. There were moments when the physical limitations of our relationship felt frustrating. Friends would make jokes and sometimes it stung. But every time I felt doubt creeping in, I would remind myself why we were doing this. I would think about the wedding night, about starting our marriage on this foundation of patience and commitment. I told myself it would be worth the wait. That the person who waits for you is the person who truly values you. I believed that with everything I had. Then came the last month before everything fell apart. Sarah started pulling away slowly at first, so gradually that I almost did not notice. She would take longer to respond to my texts. When we talked on the phone, she sounded distracted. She started working late more often, telling me about this big project her company was working on, some major client they were trying to land. I tried to be understanding. I knew her job was demanding. So I would bring dinner to her office, trying to be supportive, but when I showed up, she seemed almost annoyed, like I was intruding on something. Her smiles became forced. When I would reach for her hand, she would pull away after a few seconds, saying she needed to check her phone or adjust her bag. The warmth that had always existed between us started to feel cold, distant. I kept telling myself it was just stress, that once this work project was over, things would go back to normal. But deep in my gut, I knew something had changed. I just did not want to admit it. The breakup happened on a Friday evening in late September. Sarah asked me to meet her at Laurelhurst Park, not at our usual coffee shop, not at either of our apartments. That should have been my first clue. The leaves were just starting to turn that early autumn palette of gold and rust. The air had that crisp quality that makes Portland feel alive, but I felt sick to my stomach the entire drive over. She was sitting on a bench near the pond when I arrived, wearing jeans and a sweater I had bought her for her birthday. She did not stand up when she saw me approach. She just looked at me with this expression I had never seen before. Not sad exactly, more like resigned, decided. I sat down next to her, and before I could even ask what was wrong, she started talking. She said she needed space. She said we had gotten together young, and maybe we needed to explore who we were as individuals. She said she loved me but was not sure she was in love with me anymore. Every sentence was a cliché I had heard in a dozen movies, and each one landed like a physical blow. I asked her why. I asked her to be specific, to tell me what I had done wrong, what I could fix. I begged her to at least try couples counseling, to not throw away 3 years without fighting for it. But Sarah just kept shaking her head, her voice maddeningly calm. It is not you, it is me. I just need to figure myself out. We are at different places in our lives. Every explanation was vague, circular, meaningless. I asked about our plans, about the future we had talked about for 3 years. She looked away toward the pond and said maybe those were never realistic. Maybe we had been kidding ourselves. Her voice when she said that was so cold, so unlike the woman I thought I knew. It was like talking to a stranger wearing Sarah's face. The whole conversation lasted maybe 20 minutes. 20 minutes to dismantle 3 years of my life. When she finally stood up, I grabbed her hand. One last, desperate attempt to make her stay, to make her explain what was really happening. She pulled away gently but firmly and said she was sorry. Then she walked to her car and drove away, leaving me sitting alone on that bench. I do not know how long I stayed there, long enough for the sun to set, for the park to empty out, for the streetlights to flicker on. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, trying to find the moment where I could have said something different, something that would have changed the outcome. But there was nothing. She had already made up her mind before she even called me there. I was not part of the decision. I was just the person being informed. The first week after the breakup was a blur. I could barely function at work. I would stare at my computer screen, supposedly writing code, but really just seeing Sarah's face over and over, hearing her say those empty words. Marcus tried to help. He would drag me out to bars, to basketball games, anywhere to get me out of my apartment, but nothing worked. I was stuck in this loop of trying to understand what went wrong. I kept replaying our 3 years together, looking for clues I had missed. Was I not attentive enough? Did I work too much? Was it because I had waited like she asked? Did that somehow make me less desirable in her eyes? The questions were endless and unanswerable. I would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, my mind running in circles until exhaustion finally pulled me under. Jenny called me multiple times that week. She was shocked when I told her about the breakup. She kept saying it did not make sense that she had just talked to Sarah 2 weeks ago and everything seemed fine. My mom called too, offering to come visit, but I told her I needed time alone. The truth was, I did not want anyone to see me like this, broken and pathetic, mourning a relationship that apparently had meant more to me than it did to Sarah. I tried texting Sarah a few times in those early days. Nothing dramatic, just simple messages asking if we could talk, if she would reconsider. The messages showed as read, but she never responded. After 5 days of silence, I forced myself to stop. She had asked for space, and even though it killed me, I decided to give it to her. Maybe if I respected her wishes, she would realize what she was throwing away. Maybe she would come back. 6 weeks passed. 6 weeks of going through the motions, of pretending to my coworkers that I was fine, of declining invitations from friends because I could not handle being around happy couples. The ring I had been designing was still sitting in the jeweler's workshop waiting for final approval. I could not bring myself to cancel the order. Some stupid part of me still held on to hope. Then one night I made the mistake of checking Instagram. Sarah and I had not unfollowed each other. I guess neither of us wanted to be the one to make that final cut. I scrolled through my feed mindlessly, not really paying attention until her name appeared. It was a photo of her at the Observatory, this upscale restaurant downtown with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the city lights. Sarah was in a black dress I had never seen before, her hair styled in loose waves. She was laughing, genuinely laughing in a way I had not seen in months when we were together. And next to her, with his arm casually draped across the back of her chair, was a man in an expensive suit. He was older than me, maybe mid-30s, with perfectly styled hair and a watch that probably cost more than my car. The caption read, "Celebrating new beginnings." A champagne glass emoji. Nothing else. But the comments section was full of her friends congratulating her, saying things like, "So happy for you, and you two look amazing together." My hands started shaking as I clicked on the man's profile. Derek Morrison, Vice President of Strategic Development. The company name listed was the same one where Sarah worked. His profile was full of exactly what you would expect. Photos of expensive cars, vacation shots from Bali, the Amalfi Coast, Dubai, wine tastings at exclusive vineyards. Everything about his profile screamed money and status, and a lifestyle I could never provide. I felt like someone had punched me in the chest. 6 weeks. It had been 6 weeks since Sarah told me she needed to find herself, and here she was dressed up and celebrating with some executive from her company. The betrayal was not just that she had moved on so quickly, it was the speed of it, the ease of it. While I had been drowning, she had been climbing into someone else's life. I tried to tell myself maybe they were just friends, maybe it was a work thing, but I knew better. You do not look at a coworker the way she was looking at him in those photos. You do not write celebrating new beginnings about a professional relationship. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that photo. Sarah, smiling, Derek's arm around her. The comments from people congratulating them. I felt sick, angry, confused, heartbroken, all at once. But more than anything, I felt stupid. Stupid for waiting, stupid for believing, stupid for thinking I was special. The next morning, Marcus called me. His voice was serious in a way that immediately put me on edge. He said we needed to talk, that there was something I needed to know. We met at a diner near my apartment, one of those places with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that tastes like it has been sitting on the burner since dawn. Marcus did not waste time with small talk. His girlfriend worked at the same company as Sarah, and word had gotten around the office. It was not speculation or rumor. People knew. They had been seen leaving work together, going to hotels, not even trying to hide it anymore. The timeline made me nauseous. Marcus said the affair had been going on since before Sarah and I broke up. All those late nights, she claimed to be working on that big project. She was with him. All those times she pulled away from me seemed distant and distracted. She was already emotionally checked out, already planning her exit. And here was the part that made me want to scream. Derek had apparently already bought an engagement ring. 6 weeks after my relationship ended, Sarah was on track to be engaged to someone else. Someone she had been willing to sleep with after knowing him for a fraction of the time she made me wait. 3 years. I had waited 3 years because she told me her values mattered, because intimacy was sacred, because she wanted to save herself for marriage.